Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for the financial aid process. It's about 3 o'clock. We know that folks are going to be trickling in after their classes. So we know, people are going to be moving around. We're really glad you could make it. We are going to start off. I'm excited to introduce, we have 3 panelists today. Kristen, Stacy, and Michael, who are joining us from different colleges, and they'll say a little more once we get rolling. But I'm going to promptly turn it over to Kristen. Kristen, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to add you to the stream. For folks watching, you can do live comments, and we will try to get to your questions. Each person's going to have about 3 to 5 minutes to talk, and then we'll go through some kind of common questions. So yeah, that's about it. All right. I'm going to send Kristen up. Thanks.
Great. Well, I'm Kristen Crosby, and I am the regional representative for Ohio Wesleyan University. I actually live in New England, and typically I would enjoy traveling around New England this fall and meeting with students in person, but here we are. So I'm just going to quickly introduce some general financial aid information, and then I'm going to turn it over to my 2 colleagues who are definitely the experts. But this first slide here, I think, is really important to keep in mind. Financial aid offices are here to help you. They are your best source for information. They're your free source for information. Sometimes people think maybe they're a little bit hands-off or they shouldn't contact them, but the financial aid offices do want to work with you and are very helpful and can answer all of your questions. They can even assist you with the application process as you are applying for financial aid. They're the ones, of course, who determine your eligibility, so they can answer those specific questions. And as you're going through the application process, they can also give you an idea about the balance of free aid that might be available to you, employment options, student loans, and things like that. And they're going to be your representatives for your time when you're in college as well. So it's great to take advantage of developing that working relationship with your financial aid officer right from the very beginning. Just trying to advance my slides here. So there are types of financial aid that go into financial aid packages, and colleges and universities might have various ways of packaging a little bit differently, but financial aid is offered in the form of scholarships and grants, as well as loans and student employment. So what you should know is that scholarships and grants are free. They're a gift that does not have to be paid back. Unlike student loans, those do have to be paid back after enrollment ends. And my colleagues will talk about that in a minute. A work study might also be part of your financial aid package, and it allows students to earn some wages during college. You may be able to set up a payment plan to put some of those wages towards paying off your tuition, but typically student employment is more towards paying for personal expenses and books and things like that. So just a couple things about how and when to apply for financial aid. The FAFSA, this is something that pretty much all U.S. institutions will utilize. And the good news is that it's after October 1st, so you can start working on the FAFSA. And the website is fafsa.ed.gov. It is only for U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and green card holders. But if you meet any of those, then FAFSA is what you want to use. Some institutions also require the CSS profile. It's about 400, maybe fewer, universities and colleges that require the CSS profile. This is something that you would use your College Board login to access it. The CSS profile is not free. It costs $25 to complete it and $16 for each additional institution, but you may be able to request a waiver. And it is also available to access after October 1st. You can complete the FAFSA on my slide looks a little messed up, but you can use the website. They also have a mobile app, and there are lots of benefits to completing it online because it has skip logic that allows you to skip unnecessary questions. It gives you the option to use your IRS data retrieval to import your tax information. And it also has a lot of detailed instructions and help for common questions. There's also the mobile application, which is very convenient because you can check in on your phone. And then in terms of some tips and tricks for the FAFSA before I turn it over to my colleagues, don't wait to file it. Some colleges and universities may consider you incomplete if they're waiting for your FAFSA. You will need a social security number to use that for your FSA ID. And you could use a website, the mobile app. There's even a PDF. You can only list 10 institutions. If you want to add more later, that means that one is going to come off the list. And it doesn't matter in what order you list your colleges. We're not going to be seeing that. You can save it and come back later. So that's great news. You don't have to fill it in one sitting. And as I mentioned, you can use the IRS retrieval process to retrieve your tax information. And if there are divorced parents, you're going to use the parent with whom the student lived most the previous year. If your parents are remarried, it's the household income that includes the step-parent, but it doesn't include the spouse's income. And don't forget that when you sign the FAFSA electronically, you're going to use your FSA ID. I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues now. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I always have some fun technical parts. I've got 3 different microphones and my computer can't ever decide which one to use. So let me know, anybody, if it's coming through funny. So my name is Michael Ireland. I work in student financial services at Smith College, just across the way in Northampton, although I am not living there right now. I'm living here in Amherst. And so, thanks so much for having me here today. Kristen, thanks for that kind of introduction. A few things that I wanted to focus on. One, I want to talk a little bit about some of those forms. So the forms are very important. So colleges will often have deadlines. So it's important that we all keep our eyes out on those deadlines. Some colleges say if you miss the deadline, you may miss the opportunity for that year or maybe multiple years to qualify for particularly their institutional aid. Often federal financial aid is available no matter when you apply for it, no matter when you fill out the FAFSA form. But many colleges will use that FAFSA and also the CSS profile for their institutional aid. And their deadlines are usually pretty tough. And so you want to keep an eye on those deadlines. So definitely watch those. In addition to those 2 forms, the FAFSA and the profile, colleges will sometimes have their own institutional application. So check their websites and make sure you're completing that piece of it also. And some colleges, like Smith, will ask for copies of those tax returns that they're going to want to look at. And so for students who are seniors now in high school applying for the fall of 2021, seems like a long ways away, but it's coming up, they'll actually be looking at the 2019 income information. So that's what you'll be filling out in the FAFSA and that CSS profile. So Kristen mentioned a couple of things about the FAFSA where it's the custodial parent or the custodial household's information that goes on there. With the CSS profile, it's a little bit broader form that will ask for both the custodial and then later on through a separate process, the non-custodial information. That information is never shared back and forth between households, but with colleges that want the CSS profile, they want data from everybody. And so we're going to look at it all. So that's a big difference between those 2 forms. In addition to that, they'll ask a little bit different questions. The profile is going to ask a little bit more detail. They'll ask about your primary home, whereas the FAFSA, you do not need to put the value and information about your primary home. The profile is a little bit different on how it looks at businesses also, whereas the FAFSA is a little a little easier on the business side. If your business is a small family-owned business, you don't need to report the asset value of that business. You need to report the income, but not the asset value. So there are a few differences that you'll find with those forms as you go along the way. The other thing that I find is very important in the process is once you get that financial aid award from a college, feel free to reach out to the school. I mean, just as Kristen said, contact the financial aid office. They are your friends. So reach out to us and ask some hard questions. Say, how did you come up with this financial aid award? How did you calculate this? What went into that calculation? And make sure that they've really accounted for everything in your circumstances, particularly if your circumstances as a family may have changed, income may have dropped, or you had a really big expense of some sort. Colleges often want to know that so that we can look at ways and things that we can change that could be beneficial to you. So it does not hurt to reach out to schools, and so definitely do that even after you've gotten a financial aid award. Ooh, speaking of financial aid award, remember, for all these forms, they are the students' forms. They are not our forms as parents. They are the students' form. So that social security number, that's your student's social security number. Not mine will go in there eventually as a parent, but remember, the initial social security number is the student's. And the financial aid award, the financial aid application, that all belongs to the student now. You're just helping them out along the way. So remember that part as you go. Two more things I wanted to share. One is to use something called a net price calculator. And the net price calculator is an online calculator that every college in the US has to have on their website. It's a great way for you as a parent or as a student to enter your data and get an estimate for that individual college of what financial aid might look like. So definitely take advantage of that to begin to get an idea of what it may look like. You want to be careful entering the data because there's no validation of that data. Whatever you enter, that's what the result is going to give you. But certainly a great tool. And the final thing I wanted to share really quickly, that here in Massachusetts, there's an organization called the Massachusetts Education Finance Authority, known as MIFA. Many of you probably know about it already from information from Deidre or from others. And it's a great organization that they have videos on their website that will walk through this process, a little bit what we're doing today, but in detail for each of those different forms and about financial aid in general. So definitely take advantage of what's available there. For that, I will turn it back over to my friend Stacy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Michael and Kristen. This is a lot of fun. Michael didn't mention, but Michael and I are longtime colleagues and actually parents of students at ARHS in the class of 2022. So hopefully we have some classmate families out there, and I think we both know quite a few families in the class of 2021 as well. So it's a double pleasure for us to be here today. Going to bring a little different perspective to the table. First, in my professional perspective, like Michael and Kristen, spent many years in college administration, and I was a director of financial aid. I've also been a vice president at JP Morgan, but for the last 7 or so years, I have been working for an organization called Bright Horizons College Coach, where we provide college coaching services to employees that are provided on behalf of their employers. So basically, free benefit, everybody gets free college coaching. So my team really guides thousands of families through the college process every year, at every college across the country and many international schools. So hopefully I can bring a little bit different flavor, answer a lot of the same questions that Michael and Kristen can, but things are slightly different. And I'm also going to bring a little different topic to the screen for us today as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about merit scholarships. So when we talk about merit scholarships, they're not necessarily need-based per se, but what we do know is that they are part of the financial aid process and that they're being awarded by colleges and universities themselves. So I'm hoping you can see my screen. I can't tell if you can see my screen. Let's see. Not sure because I'm no longer seeing you guys. Let's see. Hold on. Okay. I believe you can see it. Oh, nope, maybe you can't. Oh, goodness. Hold on. Well, we're going to go ahead and proceed without the screen because it does not want to seem to share at the moment. Let me try one more time. Okay. Nope. Does not look like you are seeing. Are you seeing? Okay, I believe you are. I still can't see the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed, and hopefully you can. So really what we are talking about today is merit scholarships. Merit scholarships are awarded to about 22% of all undergraduate students. It comprises about 22% of all student aid that is awarded to students in the form of institutional merit scholarships. So very often families will come to us and ask about, where should I be applying for scholarships? And I think a lot of people think the universe of private scholarships, those sort of ones that are awarded by outside entities, are lucrative, and they're great, but they are nowhere near as lucrative or as available as those that are offered by the colleges themselves. So when you think about the college scholarship process, you really want to think about the merit scholarships offered by colleges and universities. We do know that by and large, the vast majority of these are going to be coming from private colleges versus public colleges, although it is no longer the rule. We do see a lot of exceptions to private and public colleges awarding merit scholarships. When you think about merit scholarships, I really want you to change your perspective for a moment. You now know that I'm the parent of a high school student, and part of my thinking is, wow, I would love for my daughter to be awarded a reward or a scholarship for all the hard work she's put in. And of course, as a parent, I'm going to think that. But I want you all to think about this from a different perspective. I want you to think about the way that colleges use their merit scholarship dollars. And what they do is they use those dollars to recruit the students that they want the most. So don't think of it as a reward, think of it as a recruitment tool. And in it being a recruitment tool, how do you then become strategic in identifying those opportunities for your student? Well, you're going to put together a college list, and I think there's actually even a panel discussion on putting together the perfect college list. From an admission perspective, our admissions colleagues will cover all of that. They'll talk about the likelihood of acceptance, and they'll talk about, the balanced list and making sure you have the right mix. And I completely agree with all that. But what I'm going to do is ask you to take that same list and now shift it over to look at it from the likelihood of scholarship perspective. If the student is applying to a college that is a reach or a challenging school for them, you definitely want to recognize that there's probably little chance of obtaining a scholarship at that particular institution. Maybe it's a little bit out of their range from an academic perspective. Maybe their grades and scores aren't there. Or maybe it's one of those Ivy League or highly selective colleges that do not award scholarships. And I'm going to reiterate that point because it's something that a lot of families don't realize, and that is that the most highly selective colleges and the Ivy League colleges do not award merit scholarships. Well, you might want to ask why. Remember what I said on the previous slide. Colleges use their money to recruit the students that they want the most. Most of our highly selective schools and Ivy League colleges don't actually need to recruit. They're turning students away. So they don't need to use those dollars to entice their students. Instead, they have extraordinarily generous need-based financial aid policies. So it certainly usually covers a lot of the same perspectives. So when you think about the next tier of colleges, so maybe you're thinking about your student applying to 9, 10, 11, 12 schools. You might want to think about 3 or 4 of those being in that challenging perspective. Everybody wants to go for those reach schools. But make sure you're balancing that list with some of those schools that might be just right or no problem. Because what that does is it really gives the student an opportunity for a greater opportunity for merit scholarships. At those schools where they sort of look like the mix of applicants or maybe better than some of the applicants, they might have a better chance. But at those no problem schools or safety schools, as we used to call them, the student has a much better opportunity. You want your student to look better than the majority of the applicant pool. Another sort of minor strategy involved in that is thinking about other schools in those categories that might be competitors. And I'll talk about why that matters in just a moment. So when you think about how does my student, or if you are the student with us today, how do I stand out? It's all the things. It's your grades, it's your scores, it's the things that you're involved in. It can even be things as simple as choosing a major at a college that might be new to that college, so they want to enroll. It might be that you're participating in programs that they don't have. It could be that you're a student from Massachusetts looking to go to college in North Dakota. Maybe that school in North Dakota has no representation from Massachusetts. So just know that when you're looking to stand out in your applications, it's going to be sort of the entire body that makes up you. So that's how you will ultimately stand out. So if you're still looking to add things to your resume, just know that those are some of the things that could differentiate you in the process. Now, if you need to do a little research on where you can find out whether or not colleges have merit scholarships, there is no magical list. I wish there was. In fact, some colleges make it complicated to even find their merit scholarships on their websites, but I would suggest starting with the college's website. Check for scholarship pages. Check departmental scholarships as well. Often we'll find that colleges within larger universities award their own scholarships. And also, Michael mentioned a moment ago, complete those net price calculators. A lot of colleges and universities will include their scholarship offering in their net price calculator as well. So you might have a sense of whether or not your student will qualify. Sometimes colleges will go as far as even putting what their metrics are for determining scholarship eligibility. So you may even have an idea of where your student will fall based on their qualifications. Although I will tell you, those are a little more rare. If you are looking for some other websites to maybe gather some quick information, you can use a site like College Navigator at nces.ed.gov or the College Board website at bigfuture.org. A lot of you are probably already using that. I can tell you I use that particular site every single day. Then as you kind of think through the process, a lot of questions we get are about how do I apply for those scholarships? Is there anything that I need to do? Realistically, more times than not, there is no separate application for merit scholarships. Most colleges will allow your admission application to serve as your merit scholarship application, but not always. So my suggestion to you, and I think my colleagues would back me up on this, is create a spreadsheet. Include on that spreadsheet what forms are required for financial aid, FAFSA, profile, taxes. What are the deadlines for financial aid? What are the requirements for merit scholarships? What are the deadlines for merit scholarships? Couple of pro tips that I will give you. If you are looking at merit scholarships, we are starting to see that a lot of colleges are asking students to apply during an early application process to be considered for merit scholarships. So you might find that students applying for an early action program might have priority at merit scholarships. And in fact, the schools might not accept merit applications during regular decisions. So make sure you're paying close attention to those. Also, double check the school websites to make sure that they are not, in fact, requiring anything separate. Sometimes there can be a different scholarship program that maybe a donor has requested specific scholarship information. So you just want to double check to make sure nothing else is required. And if possible, and you know the specific requirements of a particular scholarship program, you might be able to tailor some of your admission application to that scholarship. And finally, I do want to mention that there are some colleges that would be willing to discuss the offers that you've gotten from their competitors. As a former financial aid director, I loathe the idea of playing let's make a deal, but I like to think of it a little bit differently now. And that is, if you've been offered something significantly different from one school than another, and you think they're competitors and you think they may have seen something differently, just go back to them. Let them know that you have another offer and you'd like to discuss the particulars. Michael mentioned it earlier. They want to help. They want to know if they're reading something differently, particularly with regard to merit. The worst that they can say is no, but I will encourage you to go back and ask, because I can tell you from our perspective, we find that about 40 to 50% of the time, schools are willing to take another look. So I think at this point, we are going to throw back and see if we have any questions that came into the queue. Okay. I don't know if all three of us are back in the screen. There we go. Okay.
You were on your own before us, Stacey.
I know. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So it does look like we have a few questions. Okay, I'll go ahead and read them unless, I don't know if Amanda wants to come back in, but first question, and I think, Michael, you covered this a bit, but you might want to dive a little deeper, and that is, what if you share custody 50-50? Actually, I'm sorry, Kristen, I think you covered it. What if we share custody 50-50?
Yeah, I'm happy to. We could play tag team. So yeah, deciding who the custodial parent is, it's a part of the game. And so you could have 50-50 custody, but technically you want to pick the parent who the student lived with the majority of the time during the year. So sometimes it's hard to figure that out. If it gets down to a 1 or 2 day difference, go with a parent. You got to pick one of them, and that's the number one criteria. And that's usually the one you want to use ideally, because the second criteria is which parent provided more financial support. And if it's a FAFSA only school, ideally you go with the custodial parent based on where you lived as a student the most of the time, and possibly the parent that earned less money than the other one. So those are the two primary criteria as you move down the line. To determine who the custodial parent is. And that's for both the FAFSA and the profile. Ultimately, the profile will want information from both of those, the non-custodial and the custodial parent, but the FAFSA, again, is just the custodial parent who will go on there. Do you have anything else I want to add on that one?
Nope, I didn't see anything else come in.
Okay.
Okay, Kristen, I think this is your specialty. What should international students do?
Yes, so I work with international students and I review international financial aid forms all the time. And I think my colleagues have provided some incredibly helpful information. And as a starting point, Stacy provided some great information about making your list. So if you are going to need financial assistance, paying for college as an international student, you'll definitely want to do your research and zero in on schools that actually have financial assistance or merit scholarships for international students, because not all do. Once you've made your list, you will have to provide some kind of application. And many colleges and universities that provide merit scholarships or financial aid for international students will take something called the International Student Financial Aid Form. We just call it the ISFA. That is unfortunately not a form that you can fill out on a website. It's a PDF that you have to print out, fill it out by hand in pen or pencil. Actually, don't use a pencil, and scan it and send it to college or university. As I mentioned, only about 400 colleges and universities require the CSS profile, and it is harder to get a waiver for profile as an international student, but it certainly doesn't hurt to ask for a waiver. You could also sometimes submit what's called a certification of finances form in place of the ISFA, but whether it's the ISFA or the certification of finances form, basically colleges and universities want to determine what sources of funding you have that you'll be able to contribute towards the cost of education. And once the scholarship is applied, do you have savings? Do you have assets? Do you have income that's going to allow you to cover the cost of the first year of education? So it's especially important to submit that information with your application. So don't wait to get an admission decision and then submit it.
Right.
We won't read your application if we don't have it, typically.
Excellent. I will grab the next one, and it is, what if, like so many in the pandemic, 2019 doesn't reflect your current situation? I think this is the question I've answered the most in the last 3 months. And I think it is just globally something that's affecting so many people. So as Michael said earlier, when you're applying for the FAFSA and or profile, they are going to be primarily looking at your 2019 tax information if you are a senior this year. If you are a class of 2022, they'll be looking at your 2020 and so on. So for the FAFSA and profile, for FAFSA, you will provide your 2019 information as it is. On the profile, they're actually going to ask you for information a little bit about 2019. They're going to ask about 2020 and 21, although they're going to be doing the analysis based on 2019. On the profile, they also ask for any special circumstances. So there's a small box you can provide there. However, my best advice is that if your circumstances have changed from what is being reported on the FAFSA, you should be prepared to communicate that information with your colleges and universities. And I would do it with all of them. And I am also, and my colleagues can jump in too, I'm advising that folks do it up front this year. A lot of times families would wait until after they've gotten their initial award and then go back to appeal. But I think this year we're seeing such major changes in people's lives that they want to make sure that information is reflected up front. Schools may or may not be able to respond to it up front. So what you want to do is provide to them in writing explanation of what the change of circumstances are, whether it's a loss of income, medical expenses. Gosh, we have had everything, natural disaster, you name it. If your 2020 income or your 2020 family circumstances look different than 2019, document it, share any corroborating information that you can, and schools can and will take a look at that information.
I totally agree with that. I mean, Stacy, that's exactly right. And doing it ahead of time is a great time to do it. And the narrative section on the profile is helpful, but an additional letter with any supporting documentation is always appreciated too. And the other piece to remember is, as Kristen talked about in the early on, is the FAFSA does not have a narrative section. Right. So if the colleges you're looking at are FAFSA only, there's no place to write anything. Yep. So you definitely want to send in a letter, an email, something that's a little more formal and gives a fair bit of detail. Financial aid folks, we love numbers. And so if you can give us numbers, that's great. That means we don't have to come back and ask you what those numbers are. So definitely when you send in an additional letter like that, say that, give us those numbers. Like instead of I lost my job, it's like, oh, I lost my job, and so I anticipate zero income for 2020, or I anticipate $6,000 of unemployment income and zero wages, that kind of thing. So actual numbers are wonderful. We like to see those.
Yep, absolutely. And one sort of quick caveat, we do know that there are, some of the larger colleges and universities are going to make their initial offer based on what's on the FAFSA. So if you do get competing offers that look nothing like each other because maybe a smaller school was able to read the details and a larger wasn't, just double check and go back to those schools to make sure that they in fact were reading the appeal information. It's a tricky time. Everybody's going to try to do everything they can, but I think we want to make sure we're giving everybody sort of, understanding that not everything's going to happen the same way. Okay, another question, and I'll throw this out. I'm just arriving. I filled out the FAFSA. What is the next step? I heard you mention something about other financial aid forms.
I can, you got to stop me. So I'll just keep talking. So yes, it's great. You've done the FAFSA, and so I'm hoping that's the student that's done the FAFSA. It's the student's SSN that you started with. That's an important piece. And what you want to do is you want to check the website for the colleges that the student is applying to, because they may have additional forms. Maybe it is a college that requires the CSS profile. So as Kristen said, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 colleges that require that form. So make sure that your schools does not require that form. Additionally, they may have an institutional application of some sort that they have some more detailed questions that they want to know about. Some places will also ask for a tax return or a business tax return if your parents own a business. So check individual college websites to see what they are asking for, and then send that into them. Most colleges now will have some kind of portal system that they're going to give you a password and ID for once you apply for admission there. And you can log in to see what they've received and what they're still looking for at the college for both financial aid and for admission. That's kind of important because sometimes at a college, they may think they need something, but they really don't. And it could be we interpreted a question. It's like, oh, we need this form. And they will consider your aid application incomplete until they get whatever that is they think they need. So if they have an outstanding document, either send it in to them or send them an email and ask them why they're asking for that thing, so that they either waive it or they say it's received, because you want your application to be complete. Other pieces I should add, Stacy, Kirsten?
I would just add, it might be stating the obvious, but be sure to keep checking your email, because colleges and universities will email you if something is missing, if they're having a webinar on the financial aid and scholarship process, if there is some kind of scholarship competition. And you would be surprised at how often we email students and they don't check their email, and they didn't know that they had to submit something extra for their financial aid form. So be sure to check those email accounts regularly.
And I think both Kristen and Michael have hit on something. Let's put a fine point on it. We keep saying you because I think we're talking to students, right? No. So if you haven't gleaned this yet, parents of seniors, you are no longer relevant to the conversation, except maybe paying that bill. Colleges are going to communicate directly with the students themselves. So if you're looking for information and it's not coming, tap your student on the shoulder and remind them they need to be checking their email. Going forward, everything's going to go to and through them. They can certainly give waivers and allow you access to information, but do know that most of the communication is going to happen directly with students, and that's where we see things fall apart all the time. So just another sort of quick tip. We do have a lot of time left, and hopefully there are more questions, so please send them in. Kristen and Michael, anything that you think we missed that we should be covering?
Oh, there is plenty. We could, the three of us can just talk financial aid all day. So we could certainly do that. One piece that came to mind for me, I was taking notes while both Kristen and Stacy were talking, because there's some good tips they have in there. And so one piece that came to mind for me, I think, I'm thinking about merit scholarships particularly. So, I think as Stacy said, many of those come from colleges themselves. So that's a great place to get additional money. Outside of that, we often call them outside scholarships. So that's certainly a good source too. One thing, at this point, there's not too much we can do about that as parents necessarily, but you want to be aware of the policy that colleges have on outside scholarships. What do colleges do if your student gets an outside scholarship or a lot of outside scholarship money? What will they do to their own institutional financial aid? Doesn't often impact too many students, but it can sometimes, if your student gets $10,000 in outside scholarships, it could be, particularly at need-based colleges, they may reduce a portion of their need-based grant. It's just a piece to be aware of. I mean, that for outside scholarships, and also, particularly in where we live in the Pioneer Valley, there are a number of colleges here. So there are parents who work at colleges. They will sometimes have a tuition benefit. So that's, as an employee of an institute, of an organization, they may provide some kind of help to pay for your kids to go to college. So certainly ask your employers, but then be aware of what individual colleges will do with that money. So that's great. I gotta, have this tuition benefit to help my kid pay for college. But if I also had a need-based grant and they're going to reduce that need-based grant, I just need to be aware of that so that it's not a surprise when it gets time to pay the bill a little bit later on. So just a piece to be aware of. So that's fun.
I think I would just add that when it comes to a few months from now, reviewing all of those financial aid offers, you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Yep. So what I've noticed sometimes when students share with me other offers is that one university might be showing the current year expenses, which might go up the next year. And another college or university might be showing the expenses of the upcoming year. So make sure that you're looking at the right anticipated charges of the upcoming academic year. And when they're putting in costs for a meal plan or housing, make sure that you're looking at that two equal things. Because I've worked at an institution before Ohio Wesleyan that would package everybody with a 14 meal plan. But if you're a student who's going to eat 3 meals a day, you want to know what that meal plan is going to cost you. So make sure you look at those fine details.
And actually, I would add to that, I was going to make a very similar point, and that is when you're comparing those apples to apples, make sure, in fact, they are apples to apples. You may look at one offer and say, oh, good, this school has offered me $50,000. This school has offered me $20,000. Look at the cost of the school and do the math before you make that decision. And also take a look at those components of that offer. Some colleges will award financing or loans that families are expected to cover the balance, but that's not an award. That's something you actually would have to qualify for. You may or may not want it as a family. Every school could do that. So what you want to look at is those attributes that would actually reduce your overall cost, and then make that sort of final decision based on your out-of-pocket cost. One thing that we spend a lot of time talking about is not necessarily your expected family contribution or the cost of the school. Look at your net price. What is coming out of your pocket as a family, and then make those comparisons. It looks like actually we have a very related question. So the next question is, once you complete the FAFSA, does it tell you how much financial aid you will receive, or is it tied to a specific school's tuition? Anyone can grab that.
Okay, I'll go. So it's very interesting. So the FAFSA itself, it will give you a number. They call it the expected family contribution. But the number, it's marginally helpful, kind of, but in my mind, really, it's more, colleges use that more as a comparison between students and families. So the reality is you really have to wait to get the actual financial aid award from individual colleges to know what it really is going to look like. Because, I mean, just as Stacy said, you could get piles and piles of financial aid from one college and less from another, but if piles and piles of that financial aid is a giant parent loan, that's not money you necessarily want to have. It's a big loan that you don't necessarily want. So you have to wait. Colleges interpret that expected family contribution number differently, and their costs are different. So definitely wait until you get those actual awards from colleges, and then do your comparison.
One thing I think that we find a lot is that families don't realize that when you complete the FAFSA and the profile, actually, they're both centrally processed. So you complete them, you list the number of colleges that you have, and I know Kristen mentioned that you can list 10 at a time. That is then sent to a central processor, and that information is all sent out to the schools, and then the schools themselves do the analysis that Michael is talking about. So every school is going to read things slightly differently, and they're going to make their offers differently. I think we've mentioned, too, that there are some schools that meet full need, about 80. Only about 80 schools that meet full need. That's kind of important to know. So if you're looking at that EFC number and you're thinking, wow, our EFC is only whatever it might be in the school cost, we're going to get a lot of money. You're only going to get a lot of money at 80 schools. The rest of the schools are going to give you as much as they can. But then there might be what is called a gap. The gap between the cost and what you've been given also becomes the family's responsibility. So just know that it's really important to wait to see what each individual school comes back with, and then you make those comparisons. Other questions? It's so early in the process, but yet it's going to be over before you know it. I always think about October, and it's like, oh, May is, tomorrow. I'm already starting to refer to my daughter as an almost senior because it feels like it's that close. So for parents of seniors, this is not an easy time. We definitely recognize that, especially now. It's astonishing to be going through this right now, but go through it and just know, in a few short months, it'll be May 1 and you'll be making that decision, and hopefully everything is a little brighter then. Other questions?
It's looking pretty good. Looks like we've hit everything, answered all the questions.
All the financial aid.
You're in shock.
Yeah, exactly. Or you have no idea what to ask.
Right.
Whether it's the good or the ill, you can probably find us. So
yeah. Actually, I just remembered there's the Massachusetts. They have something called FAFSAday.org, and normally, and Deidre's probably sent something out to families about this, but normally we would do an in-person FAFSA night at the high school, and we're not doing that this year. But FAFSAday.org. They're doing online process where they go line by line through the FAFSA. So if you have not done it yet, and there's time before your deadline, definitely take a look at that website. And it's an opportunity to sit in with a Zoom or however they're doing it electronically to walk you through the process. And in case you have individual questions about specific lines that seem a little funky. And if you get to a place in the process, the Department of Ed can sometimes help. There's a phone number you can call with FAFSA questions, or you could call a financial aid office if you're grappling with a particular question. And if I were you, I would just call Smith College. Oh, actually, our phone systems are down right now. You can send us an email. Don't call us, but you can certainly send an email to Smith.
That's
and ask questions there too.
Okay, it looks like we just got a question that we really haven't spent much time on. So let's dive into the notion of private scholarships, and I'll start. And I know we all will have something to say. So, what is our perspective on big national scholarships? I'm going to go broad and just talk about private scholarships in general. So we spent a good amount of time talking about school-based scholarships, and we know that a lot of those are available. We do hear a ton about families saying, "What scholarship should I be searching for? What kind of private scholarships are out there?" and I don't want to be a naysayer, but I do want to encourage families to spend their time on the things they have to complete first. And what I mean by that is college applications, financial aid forms, homework, life. If you have extra time, searching for private scholarships can be worthwhile. However, I would do it in a way that you're focusing locally first. And I know that our college planning office at the high school is extraordinary with providing these opportunities. Start there. Then look locally. Have you been in Big Y lately and seen the big banner that says we award thousands of dollars in scholarships annually? Then focus sort of more broadly. What types of clubs and organizations are your family associated with, or what types of groups? That would be my next stop. And then finally, if you have the time and the inclination to continue this process, I would then look at some of those big national scholarship programs. Not that I don't think they aren't wonderful, and some of them are extraordinary, but the reality is the universe of folks applying for those is vast. So you have to meet all of the qualifications. I've seen families apply for 100 private scholarships and get none. I've seen families apply for 4 and get 2. So what you really want to do is do sort of a real analysis. How much time do you have? What is the benefit? And how many of the criteria of those programs do you meet? If you don't meet all of the large national ones, move on. They're great, but we used to hear back in the day, there was that sort of big book of scholarships that were left unclaimed every year. I don't think that happens as much anymore. But that's just my perspective, and I'd love to hear others.
Yeah, Stacey, that was a great assessment. I mean, I think that's exactly true. I mean, those big national ones that we'll periodically see in our in our financial aid offices, incredibly competitive, incredibly rare, and as Stacey said, I mean, we all have limited time, and we need to decide where to focus our time and energy. And I think the order you gave, Stacey, was right on the money. With college applications for admission, for financial aid, do those, do a lot of homework, and then live life. And if you get a little extra time, I don't know, hour here and there, start by looking locally and then move out from there. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add. You both covered it.
I love this question. Is there an income level that you would say it would not be worth completing financial aid forms? I know we could all cover this one. Michael, you can take the first shot.
Oh dear, that is a great question. So the person asked about income. Is there an income level where we shouldn't bother with the process? I would try the net price calculator at individual colleges to see what impact that has, because income comes into the calculation, assets come into the calculation, and even the number of dependents, number of kids that you have in college comes into the equation, and that can have a big impact. So, and the expense of the college. So, an expensive college like Smith College, where the cost of attendance is over $70,000 a year, somebody with a fairly significant income could still qualify. Their kid could still qualify for financial aid. So again, I would test that out with a net price calculator on individual colleges' websites to see if you're in the neighborhood of qualifying for aid, and then use that as your deciding factor.
Other thoughts, Kristen?
Do you want to say anything about loans? I mean, you can still benefit from being eligible for loans, and you don't have to accept the loans. You could always get the loan, look at the parameters, think about it as a family. And if you decide not to accept the loan, then you can do that. But it might be nice to have that in your back pocket.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the FAFSA form, the federal form, is what gives you access for students to federal student loans, and then there's a federal parent loan also. And for good or bad, the student loan interest rate is actually pretty good right now. And I wish I could qualify. And so swap it out with other loans that I have.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, Kristen. Is that even if you say to yourself, I don't really want my kid taking out a loan. If you're fortunate to be in that place that you don't have that expectation, you may want to consider that as part of your broader financing perspective and say, maybe I will have my kid take out a $5,000 loan that only has 2.75% interest, as opposed to me as a parent having to take some other type of loan or borrowing from a retirement account, which we don't generally recommend, or there's some other way of financing. So it's certainly, that's an excellent point, that you may decide that you want to put that into the mix of options you have available to help pay for school.
I would agree. And I would say, to take it one step further, I think in addition to the what happens if our income is different than 2019 question, the question my team is seeing the most this year is, do we have to file the FAFSA? And the answer is, you absolutely do not have to file the FAFSA, but you want to think about everything that we've talked about today. Do you want to have eligibility for student loans? Do you want to see if you are eligible? And I will give one other thing, one other note, because we work with so many colleges and universities, we do know that there are colleges that have policies that if you do not apply in your first year, you would not be permitted to apply for institutional funds in future years. You might think, well, I'm not sure we'll ever need it. Well, you never know. If your financial circumstances change from year to year, you might want to just have that freshman year FAFSA on file to make sure that schools have the data to benchmark against. Not hugely a thing, but it is something that we see. And in fact, I've seen it at a couple of schools here in the Valley, one of which I worked at. So it is something to consider, that, you might want to just use sort of filing that FAFSA as an insurance policy for future years, and the option of borrowing. I don't think we can underscore enough that student loan interest rate is very reasonable. And if it's a subsidized loan, which means the interest is not accruing, it's pretty much a 0% loan. If you decided at the time the student graduates, you want to pay it off, then you've just floated some cash for a couple of years. So just another option to think about. Well, it looks like we have exhausted our folks, and we did a pretty good job of covering all the bases. So
I think we got most of it. And there's another session, I think, that starts at 4:05 or so.
Oh,
so imagine folks are going to want to jump onto that.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right.
I think I'm not sure Amanda wants to jump on and say anything, but
Hi.
oh, there she is. Excellent.
Just wanted to say a big thank you to you all, and a big thank you for all of our great questions. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. This is such a fantastic resource. So thank you all so much. And thanks for tuning in, ARHS community. All right, I think we're going to wrap up. Does anyone have any final goodbyes?
Good luck.
All right.
Yeah, good job, everybody. Ask questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.